This week on the Dad's Making a Difference, I'm diving into living between the extremes. As fathers, we are the thermostat in our home. We set the temperature for how the family feels, how they interact day to day, how we interact together as husband, wife, dad, and children. And today I want you to be able to set the temperature in your home. But that takes some work. That takes some self reflection. It takes some honesty in saying, where am I? How am I working? Where do I operate from? And in this episode, I'm going to share how I operate from being a people pleaser to doing the really good things, to doing the really bad things, to doing the vulnerable things when no one is looking. And I want to challenge you this week through this episode to be a father making a difference, to be a dad setting the temperature in your home. It's time for you, my friend, to be the thermostat, for you to come in with emotion, emotional intelligence, integrity, and strength to lead your family well. This episode on the Dad's Making a Difference podcast starts right now. Hey, my friend, over the last few months, I've been challenged with this idea of being the thermostat in the home. It came up in a conversation I was having with my mastermind group. And truthfully, since maybe the middle of August, I've been thinking about what does this look like? What does this look like for me, Cam, as a dad, as a husband in my home, as a leader in my work, as a connection for the men that I speak to, and for you, the men who are listening to this podcast, as you go into your lives day to day. I want you to get something out of this. And what I've learned is this: as I've reflected on my role as setting the thermostat in the home, I've come to realize a lot about myself and that I operate between the extremes. And so I want to talk about that today because it is true that as men, as fathers, we are the thermostat in the home. We set the temperature of what's happening. You can see it when you walk in, you can see it when you wake up, you can see it when you go to bed. The way that we carry ourselves, the way that we bring ourselves, give ourselves, and take ourselves in the home impacts the way that our wife, the way that our partner, the way that our children respond in that environment. Yesterday morning, I had an opportunity to connect with four men that I meet with every week. We meet on a Monday morning at 6:30 a.m. every single week. It's kind of like a prayer group, but more it's an accountability and prayer group. And so we do this, the five of us have done this now for almost a year, and it's been fantastic. And so I've gotten to know these guys over a Zoom call quite well, but not as well as you connect in person. So yesterday we had an opportunity, as we came back from the summer months, get back into the routine of things, to meet together for breakfast. And it was fantastic. And we had so much conversation. I got to learn so much about these guys. Side note, if you're not connected to other men, if you're not connected to a group of men that holds you accountable, you need to find that. You need to find that in a group of friends, in a church, in a community, at work, or online. You need to find men that you can share with, have conversations with, where you hold each other accountable. Now, the five of us met for breakfast. And in those conversations, we started talking about so many things, a little bit of our backgrounds. I got to share my story a little bit. I learned about the guys around the table. And one of the topics of conversation that came up, amongst other things, some of the main conversations: health, fitness, kids' activities, balancing lifestyle, time management, being a good husband, managing stress, managing temptation. All of these things came up around the table. But really, one of the stories that stuck with me was Andrew, he was sitting at the table. He said, "Hey, I heard this on a podcast about fitness, Cam. Do you agree that we set a standard for what our kids expect of themselves?" He shared an example of growing up. I also think about how I grew up. I grew up in a rural community, a community where many of my friends were farmers. We lived on an acreage. We didn't farm. My dad worked in the city, drove in and out an hour every day, which I've shared that many times on this podcast. I love my dad. My dad loves me. When we grew up, I didn't get to see my dad that often. He was working hard during the week. He really was. He was providing for our family. He was doing everything he could to make it happen. And he did. Because look where we are now. Like, he made it happen. But what that meant was on the weekends, dad would come home Saturdays. Maybe he was doing side jobs, maybe he was working, but he had his little projects, his things that he would do, whether it was working on a vehicle, was it was stuff around the house, it had to get done. But what I often saw with my dad and my friends' dads was on Sunday, they just relaxed. They kind of sat. Now, my dad didn't do that very well, to be honest. He worked and was doing things all the time, which I kind of have followed. It's something I'm working on, it's just not going all the time. But especially with my friends whose dads were farmers, I knew they worked really hard during the week, but they would just like sit on the couch during Sunday. They would just relax. They would just tune out and observe the Sabbath or whatever and just not do anything. And I know they worked hard. My friends knew that their dads worked hard, but what they saw from their dads and the time they saw them was them sitting on the couch. And so this started this idea of that's what my dad does. This is what I'm going to do. So we talked about this around the table about setting the standard in our home. And we set the standard for, yeah, like exercise, fitness, activity levels, set the standard for the practice of faith and religion. And then one of the guys at the table yesterday brought up this of emotional intelligence. And it got me really digging into this again. What about emotional intelligence? I know with Fight the Dad Bod, we encourage guys to live fit, healthy, fulfilled lives with their family. So we're talking about setting the standard of fitness, nutrition, active living, and healthy lifestyle so that you are an example for your kids. You are changing the trajectory of your family, no matter what that might be. So you are leaving the best with your kids. Now, we all leave the best and the worst of ourselves with our children. We know that. I can see that in myself. I've got aspects of my dad, I got aspects of my mom, the best and the worst. You also have that. Think about your dad, the best and worst characteristics. You think about your mom, the best and worst characteristics. You have a little bit of those. Plus, you have your own things that you have created on your own, to yourself, your own being, based on your experiences, based on your personality, based on your character, based on what you think and what you feel and what you care about. And so right now, I'm thinking about this idea of emotional intelligence, about how do we set the temperature as men in our home when often as men, and I'm speaking personally now, we act in the extremes. I am an extreme person. You might not know that about me. My friends know that about me. I think it was more evident when I was young. I was either really happy or I was really not happy. I was called a quote unquote hothead. I would declare myself as a hothead growing up, especially in an athletic environment. I was super intense. I was athletically gifted. I was a good friend. I was kind. I worked hard. But if you did something wrong or you pushed me the wrong way, I would lose it. I remember it's embarrassing thinking back to it now, but there's so many times that I reacted instead of responded growing up. But of course, that's brain development, that's everything. But as a teenager, it was like either really good or really bad. I think I got that from my dad. I remember my dad sharing stories with me about him as a teenager growing up and things happening, and he would either respond like really good or he would go off the handle really bad. And I saw that in myself. And so here we are thinking about emotional intelligence. Now, I am either really good still or I'm really bad. I'm really happy or I'm not happy. We had a psychologist on our podcast earlier this year, and I shared on that there's probably a good 4 or 5 days a month, maybe up to a week, where I'm in a really low space. So I'm either really high, energetic, excited, or I'm really low and in a really tough spot. My wife knows this about me. My kids have kind of picked up on that, and I'm working through that. But I'm also really driven, or I'm really not. I can power through 15 podcast episodes in a week, or I can not touch the podcast for 15 weeks. Like it's that extreme. I am really all in or all out. And so I started thinking about myself, and I want you to think about yourself. Are you living in the extremes? I think about growing up as a kid, being the good kid, doing the right thing. I always wanted to do the right thing. I always wanted uh, to do right in the eyes of others. I wanted to get their approval. I wanted to be accepted. And I think this comes back to I was a 12-year-old boy, moved out of the city. My parents moved to a small town. I moved in that small town. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be brought into that community. Never really felt that I did. And the only time I really felt accepted is my parents sent me to a Christian high school in this community that was a small Christian high school, but was also a boarding school. And I really connected. My best friend, Jono, I don't know if John was out there, but John and I connected so well because he lived in the boarding school and we didn't feel like we had anybody in the town, but we connected with each other. And I was able to connect with all these kids who came from all over the country, all over the world to this boarding school. Even though I lived at home and walked to school, I was able to connect with these kids because we all kind of felt like aliens in this town. We were just different. And it wasn't until I had the opportunity of being in that high school that I started to find, quote unquote, find myself, exceed academically in some areas, not all areas, but excel athletically and in our community. And so I was always trying to please others. I am a people pleaser. I will say it. I do the good thing, the right thing in front of others for their approval. But here's the truth. And I'm going to be vulnerable with you. I do the selfish thing, the bad thing in silence and solitude, trying to push others away. There have been times in my life where I have tried to do things intentionally bad to push others away, and yet they pull me closer. And I'm sitting here thinking, as a people pleaser, I'm living between the extremes. And what is this doing to my family, to my kids, to their development? Have you ever been asked in your home by your wife, why are you always angry? Or maybe you're asked, and I've been asked this too. I've been asked, why are you always angry at certain times in my life? But maybe you're asked, why are you always so happy? How do you do that? Well, I'll tell you the truth. I've been asked both of those questions. Both are on the extreme. And as dads, we need to be very careful because we are the thermostat in our home. And whether we are always angry or perceived to be always angry or always happy, perceived to be always happy, we are setting the temperature. So I'm going to ask you this question. I want you to be self-reflective right now as you're listening to this. Is your frustration determining the temperature in your entire home? I'm gonna focus a little bit on this idea of frustration and always being angry because there was a time over the last couple of months where I felt this way. I was frustrated. I was frustrated that Fight the Dad Bod wasn't growing as fast. I was frustrated that the podcast wasn't growing as fast. I was frustrated that in my professional life I wasn't being able to move on or move on to a new position. Like I had a lot of frustration. And Kim didn't say, why are you always angry? But she did say, you're not being yourself and you're not being connected and you don't seem as happy as you always are. So I'm thinking of these things. And so I want to just dive into this. And this is me more processing for me, to be honest, in front of you. Because I've said before on this podcast, and if you listened last week, we repurposed my episode with Matt Boudreau, is because for me to sit here by myself in front of this camera and talk to myself is really hard. But I'm looking at this camera right now, and I'm speaking into this microphone right now, and I'm thinking of you, thinking to you, the man listening to this podcast, the man who might be in an area of his life right now who needs some help, some encouragement, who might need a word. I don't know what that word is, but I'm hoping God puts it through me. And I hope that as you listen to this, I can challenge you. And I'm not focusing on the negative right now to be negative. I'm focusing on it because it's an easy place to go. It's easy to use the language of extreme parenting as a dad. Because as a dad, we set the thermostat. I'm going to keep saying this over and over and over. You are the thermostat. But when you use the language of extreme parenting in your home, I found myself doing this. Hey, Braylon, quit that. Stop doing that. Why are you doing that? Stop, quit, don't. All I am trying to do in that moment is getting my kids to stop doing what they're doing because it's frustrating me. It's frustrating me. So I'm trying to get them to stop. And what the kids will do over time is they're going to change their behavior to make me happy. because they don't know why dad is frustrated. They don't know why I'm saying stop, quit, don't, and my emotions are out of check. And when we don't understand, or we have the absence of understanding of what is causing frustration, we always, as humans, assume it's us. So here's the truth. When we are walking into our home or through our home in our own insecurity, and we punish our kids and take it out on our kids because we are frustrated, they are assuming it's because of them, not because of us, because they don't understand where the frustration is coming from. So the kid, my son, Braylon, my daughter, Maya, is in a place of saying, if you were a better kid, dad wouldn't be mad at you. Or maybe dad wouldn't be so angry if I was a better kid. I need to be a good kid, not a bad kid. Or they start to identify themselves as a bad kid or a good kid. And now, instead of shaping their character, parenting becomes about shaping their behavior. I don't know about you, but I want to shape the character of my kids, not just their behavior. I think the behavior will be indicative of their character. But it's so easy for me and for you as a dad to come in when we're tired or frustrated from something and have our kids not understand. And we use the extreme language, quit, stop, don't. And then they think, I just need to be a good kid. And maybe dad won't be so mad. And they change their behavior in a way that is no longer frustrating to us. And we call them a good kid. But when their behavior is frustrating to us, we call them a bad kid. And they are caught between the extremes. And we're passing that down to our kids. I am struggling with this. I struggle with this when I'm tired. I'm struggling with this in the evenings when we've run from activity to activity and I watch and I love what they're doing. And then the last half hour before bedtime in our home, the temperature is set. I am the thermostat and everybody's a little bit cranky. Why is bedtime the crankiest part of our day? It's because as a dad, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, I want them to go to bed. So why I can go to bed? And selfishly, I'm living between the extremes and I'm expecting things from my kids that are unfair to them and they don't understand. So they start to shift their behavior to please me instead of shifting their character to please God. And so right now, I'm processing through this. Because do you know, I heard this on a podcast. Actually, there's a podcast episode back at Elevation Church, Pastor Larry Bray, thinking about this. It's like 2022, and he talked about the dad being the thermostat in the home. And he used this illustration. He had his daughter there. And I think about my son, and I can put my kid in this spot, and I want you to put your kid in your spot. I want to close your eyes, and I want you to picture your child, a toddler. Maybe they're between 3 and 5, and they have a box of crayons. And not the little box that you and I got to go to school with the 6 colors to 12 colors, but the big box, the multicolored box. That box has the 200 different colors. I know you're thinking there's 200 different colors. Yeah, like there's colors all, all over the rainbow, but there are these massive boxes of crayons. I was always so jealous of the kids who had those boxes, by the way. But I think about Braylon or Maya when they were little and they have this box and it has all these colors. Do you know that as humans, we have about 200 separate emotions and feelings that we can feel? 200. Like that box, 200 different colors. But if I were to ask you to identify them, you might be able to only come up off the top of your head with maybe 10, if you're lucky, maybe 15 of them. But truthfully, on the day to day, we only live in maybe 2 or 3. I want to challenge you. Where are you living today? Is it anger, happiness, loneliness? Is it hungry? I remember Larry saying that in this podcast. Is it hungry, angry, or numb? Because I'm living there right now. So what are the 2 emotions that you're living in, knowing that you have this entire box of emotions at your disposal? But here's the problem. As men, it's not safe to feel emotion. Anger is a safe emotion. Happiness is a safe emotion. And we start to think, are we good or are we bad? Extremes. Because when I grew up, like I said, I was living between 2 extremes. I'm a people pleaser. It is a fault, but it's also a strength of mine. It makes me really good in my profession and good when I'm coaching others and good when I'm connecting with others, but it makes it bad when I'm doing introspection and I realize that I'm not being me for how God has created me, but I'm being me for you. And I love you. You're listening to this. and I appreciate you. But I got to be me for me. And you need to be you for you. And so I was changing my behavior to make others happy. I was either good or I was bad. I was right or wrong. And along my path, I did really good at both ends. I did really good at the really good things. I did really good at the really bad things. And it started as a child, but now I'm finding as a dad at 43 years old, it's pretty dysfunctional. And for some of us listening to this, we've heard stories on this podcast that you can relate to. We've had guests on this podcast where, some of us, we just had to survive growing up. And I know my family was in survival mode at lots of times growing up. Maybe I didn't feel it. Maybe I did feel it. I don't know. But for some of us, we didn't have a care in the world. And so no matter where you are, in both cases, we are creating a perspective or perception of what happened or perspective in our family of generational conditioning. This is something I heard this week. Generational conditioning. It goes back to what Andrew shared at the table yesterday at breakfast. He said, in fitness, we are doing this. Our kids see us do this. They're going to change their trajectory. They're going to do the activities. They're going to do the things that they see us doing. We have an opportunity to change that conditioning. So as fathers, we're creating generational conditioning. So when we go back to thinking about the extremes, if we are always hungry or we're always angry or we're always happy, it's because those things are safe. Anger is a safe emotion. Happiness is a safe emotion. It's easy to understand. It's easy to communicate. It's easy to see and to show. But things like disappointment, doubt, hurt, rejection, excitement, hope, those are not safe. And as dads, we need to challenge ourselves to dive into those unsafe emotions so that we can be that for our family. We can be unsafe in our family. We can be open. We can help our kids to dive into these unsafe emotions so that they can create the character traits as they grow older. Because we want to shape character, not behavior. I'm thinking about all these emotions, and everything I express as anger or over happiness, I have related back to me being a people pleaser. That I am operating out of conditioning, doing what I think is great for others, not doing what is great for me based on what God has created me to be. I am operating out of conditioning, not creation. God created us to feel, for us to express ourselves, for us to connect with others on a different level and to show his love through us. So as a dad, how dysfunctional is it for me to allow my frustration to become my family's conditioning? It hurts me as a dad to know that I've hurt my kids through extremes. I have yelled, and I try not to yell. I've shouted. I've cried out of anger. I'm embarrassed by these things, but they have happened. They're real. But I've also had moments of extreme happiness and overjoy that my kids have not been able to understand. And it's my goal for me, and it is my goal for you, that you can know that you can overcome your own insecurity, your own conditioning, and help our kids experience all the emotions they need to build their character. Because I know that if Cam is all good or all bad, that I am working from a place of people pleasing, allowing others to determine my worth. And when we raise our children, when I say to my kids, go outside of this home and love beyond these walls, which is our family mission statement, I want them to know that their worth comes from God. Their worth is self-worth. And they are not to let others determine their worth. So then why do I? Why do you? Why as men do we let others determine our worth? As a dad, do you let that happen to you? Do you let the influences, opinions, and words of others impact the way that you're leading your family? Are you watching the influencers on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and allowing that to infect how you're leading your family? Are you allowing that to suck you away from being present in the moment? Are you operating in the extremes? So here's my challenge to you and my challenge to me this week. We're going to get out of the extremes, man. We're going to connect with each other. We're going to be open with each other. You're going to send me a message at Dad's Making a Difference on Instagram, or you're going to email me, cam@dmdpodcast.com, and you're just going to ask for accountability, because that's why I'm here. I'm not here just for you. I'm here for me. And I know that God has called me to make a difference in the lives of other men like you. And so if you reach out to me, I'm going to reach out to you. And my challenge to you, my challenge to me is to get out of the extremes this week and to stop swinging the pendulum of acceptance and rejection and accept who you are and who you're made to be. You are made to be an amazing father. You are made to be an amazing husband. You are made to be the thermostat in your home, to determine the temperature in every room and every interaction. And that's a responsibility to bear, but it is yours to bear. It's ours to bear together, and you're not in it alone. We are here in this together. So find moments this week to reflect on you, my friend, to accept yourself as a creation of God and accept that you can be a new you, a more balanced you, and you can get outside of the extremes. I hope that this was a good word. It's a short one today, but it's powerful and it's on my heart, and I wanted to share it with you. Go this week, be a dad making a difference, connect with others, get out of the extremes, and reach out if you need any support in your journey. I appreciate you, my friend, and we'll see you next week on a new episode of the Dads Making a Difference podcast.